Okay. How are we doing this evening? What did we cover yesterday? What did we learn? How are we feeling about React?
We learned about making components.
Yep. What did we get from components? I think there was a good question in the feedback form that I wanted to touch on. Can anyone answer, why are we learning React? Why are we using React? What is React good for?
I think it's good for you can put everything into one HTML, CSS, I think a Bootstrap and JavaScript, use it all at once. And I thought that you explained that React was to JavaScript like Bootstrap is to CSS.
Kind of, yes. Yeah, they're both frameworks, right? They both qualify. React is kind of unique because it not only spans JavaScript, but it also is kind of screwing with our HTML and kind of using our CSS as well, right? So there's a lot going on there. But what React is particularly good at is, someone at Facebook was like, hey, this is kind of weird. We use JavaScript to get all of this data, whether it's coming from an API, whether it's coming from a database, wherever it's coming from, right? JavaScript's getting this data. And then we're constantly meddling with our HTML, because once we deal with that data and process it all in our JavaScript, we've got to update our HTML. But it turns out that the way that the browser goes and updates all the HTML is really inefficient. The JavaScript wasn't really meant to constantly be updating our HTML and showing additional data there. So what this guy at Facebook did is said, hey, wouldn't it be cool if our HTML was kind of managed by our JavaScript? What if we took our document object model and virtualized it into our JavaScript? And that's where React really excels, is that they found a really efficient way to say, hey, when some of our data changes, we are going to very selectively go in and re-render just the parts of the screen that need to be re-rendered. And so we're going to practice a little bit with state tonight. We're going to practice with understanding how React can update our data. And eventually, we're going to work our way back up to the weather app, so that we can take our entire weather app, get that working in React, and using state to show the data that we actually care about. So React is just a really efficient way of building out interactive apps, right? Because if we think about this, we're talking about Web 3.0. Web 3.0 is all about the blockchain, right? But if we take this all the way back to Web 1.0, Web 1.0 was about replacing existing things in the real world. So NewYorkTimes.com, right? That was a newspaper, and it was meant for you to go in and get your information. Or Google.com. Okay, that was meant for you to go in, find what you're looking for, and be done with it. And then we had Web 2.0 come around with the .com bubble, early 2000s, and all of a sudden the web was getting more interactive, right? This wasn't just about us being able to get information in one direction. It was us being able to post things up to the internet, whether that's a comment, whether that's a photo on Facebook, whether that's a credit card payment that we're making, right? It's about making this more interactive. And that's really the difference between a website and a web app, right? Is a web app has a whole database behind it. It's storing all of our user interactions. And then Web 3.0 is all about blockchain, right? That's about saying, hey, all of our data right now is owned by Google or owned by Facebook, and it's living on their servers. Is there some way that we can use blockchain technology to distribute that information across multiple people's computers? So Web 3.0 still very much finding its footing, but we're talking about Web 2.0, right? That's where we've been the past 20 years or so. And that's all about how do we use databases? How do we store information and make web pages interactive? So when we take that back to thinking about our programming languages, JavaScript wasn't born in Web 2.0, it was born all the way back in Web 1.0, right? Hey, what the user is interacting with is very limited. So let's add in some additional functionality or some additional interaction, but not a ton. Well, Facebook came around and they were like, but there's got to be some better way that we can more tightly integrate our JavaScript, because our JavaScript's where all of the data and content is coming from, but to make it show up in our HTML, which works very well across different browsers. And that's where React really came into this game of, well, hey, wouldn't it be nice if we could get the best of both worlds and have our HTML showing all of our content and rendering all of our CSS, but then being able to easily adapt that based off of our JavaScript. And that's really where React kind of came together and said, hey, we can more tightly integrate that. So tonight we're going to get into state for the first time, which is the major change in how we update our document object model. And then we're going to get into a couple other concepts of iterating over data, how we can use map to make array show up in our JavaScript. And then we're going to roll it back to the weather app and say, hey, how can we take an existing website that we've already made and layered in some additional functionality into it, but how can we get our data flowing through there? So all of that said, that was a big blast explaining what React is. Hopefully that gives us a little bit more context. Or is there any questions on that or anything that we covered yesterday? Oh no, the rain has started here. Let's see how well this microphone works. Anything that we covered yesterday or any questions about that kind of rant that I just went on about React?
What is, I don't know about, what is state?
We haven't covered that yet. We're going to get into that in just 1 minute. State is how React stores data and reactively takes the state of our data to make it show up on the web page. But we haven't covered that yet. So if you don't understand it, that's completely fine. Any questions from last night's content? I know we've got a couple more concepts to cover today, and then we're going to get into hands-on, right? Tonight's the first night, finishing out the week of, hey, we're going to use React in an actual application. Just lost power for the first time.
Oh no. Is it okay if you just make a quick run through of the codes that you made yesterday?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great place to start. Let me pull that up and get started here. I've got both my laptop and the internet connection on a battery backup. So like if my power does go out, I've got like 20 minutes. Hopefully it comes back on in that time. It just did. I just got a flicker. But we'll see how well tonight goes. If people drop out, obviously major storm going on, no big deal. If we need to push some of the stuff to next week. Okay, so let me pull up our outline, both from yesterday and tonight, just to make sure we're covering all the concepts. Okay. Yesterday, we talked all about components and props, which are really the core of most of JavaScript. I'm sorry, most of React. And then events are a little bit different in React. So first things first, components, the heart of React, and really a major downfall of HTML, right? Whenever we would like to repeat our code, whenever we want to have this reusable HTML div, we have to copy and paste that a bunch of times in React. How in HTML, but in React, we are able to reuse this component, right? So down here, we made this function called teacher. And React's a little weird because we're using functions, but calling them components. React is kind of bridging the gap between our JavaScript and our HTML. So what we did is we said, hey, this teacher is going to take some props, some properties. We need to know some information about this teacher. And then when we come down into this return, our function is returning out the HTML of our component. And in this component, we're saying, hey, they've got a class name teacher, JSX, a little weird. We're using class name instead of class. For our style, we're using an object instead of a string. But when we get down in here, all of this is some regular HTML. And then we hit our curly brace here. And when we hit our curly brace here, we're saying, hold up. There's some JavaScripty stuff that we would like to put right into our HTML. And what we would like to put in is our props.teacher name. Okay, where is props coming from? That's coming from a parameter up here. But where is that parameter, that argument getting set? That's coming from up here, teacher name. So the value max is going to be set into the key of teacher name. And all of that gets magically passed in from our JSX, from React, into our props down here. Now, whenever we're working with the props itself, it's just an object. So the key inside of that object is going to be teacher name, and the value is going to be max. So if we look at what's console logging out here, it's just going to be an object. But when we've got this curly brace here, what we're doing, kind of like that template literal, right? Kind of like the $ curly brace, we're saying we don't actually want the word props.teacher name to show up. What we want to show up is whatever the value is there. And that's how we get max to show up. So props are kind of what is unique to components, right? It is saying, hey, this is how we can make a component be reusable, but be able to make that component show up different pieces of data. Question from Larry.
Hey, Max. So when you're defining the component, like where you do function teacher, basically that's kind of saying what you're going to do with the pieces of the component. I mean, of the component to some degree.
Absolutely. Yep.
And then when you're creating the instance of the component, that's where you're actually giving the different keys and values there.
For the properties, yes, for the props.
Okay. And then so like on line 18 at the end, you have like the curlies with the space in it. Is that just so when you use the value that there's added space to it?
That's prettier being overly helpful. Those are not required. Those should not have been there in the first place.
All right, thank you.
Because we are putting each one in a div here, the div is automatically going to do the width 100 for us and move it down onto the next line. So we don't really need it here. We don't really need those spaces. So let's fire this up. So we've been practicing with create React app and CDing around and making directories and all of that stuff. But if I open my app.js and I right click on my package.json, there's this option open an integrated terminal. So if we do that, you notice the terminal in VS Code put us right into Playground. And we can confirm that we're in the right space because if we PWD, it takes us desktop my code W12 day 3 Playground. It automatically CD'd us all the way down into whatever project we had open here. So when I run npm run start or npm start, it's doing the exact equivalent as if I opened a terminal and CD'd by hand into my desktop, into my code, into W12 all the way down. So I'm going to npm run start there. And that's going to pop open where we left off last night. And now if I take a look, I've got an object in my console. And if I open that object, I can see teacher name Karen. And if I open another one, I can see teacher name Ariel. What that's doing is it's console logging out the props right here. So what React is doing is it's taking our props when we used our component for the first time or any time and converting that into the object props right here. So props are basically how we reuse our HTML code, but still make each instance of that unique. Any questions on today's code, or I'm sorry, on yesterday's code before we dive into today's code?
Okay, what you just said again, you said props are how we use HTML.
Props are how we can reuse our component, reuse the HTML inside of our component, but make each component unique based off of what data is passed in through the prompts. So we had 3 teachers here, right? And the benefit of React is that we can reuse all of this code down here without having to copy and paste it 3 times. But if we did copy and paste it 3 times, we would just be able to edit the teacher's name right here, right? But because we're reusing that code and still want each teacher's unique name to show up, we can edit that in the prop, and then in the reusable code down here, kind of like a template, we can say use the data that is getting passed in through that prop and make that show up instead.
Thanks.
Any questions about components or props from last night? I feel like there was another concept. Or events. Let's revisit events for 1 second. So we've got this on-click going on here, right? And we've seen on-click before. That shouldn't be a new thing for us. We saw it in tic-tac-toe. We used events in our weather app to make the select on change work. But we've got an event going on here, right? This event is basically saying, when you click on this button, what would you like to happen? But in normal JavaScript and HTML without React, we did that in 2 separate files, right? And we had our function in our script.js, and we had our on-click on our index.html, and they just linked together. But in React, because we've got the benefit of all of our JavaScript partying up here, and then all of our HTML being returned down here, we can just link them together using JSX. So what we're able to do is to create our function above the return in JSX, but in our JavaScript portion of our JSX. And then down here in our on-click, we use these curly braces again. And again, the curly braces are telling our JSX, hold up on the HTML, we've got some JavaScript going on here. Let's make sure we understand this as JavaScript. And what we're doing is we're taking this button clicked here. Well, because it's before the return, React knows, hey, this is JavaScript going on here. And because we've got the curly braces in the return, it is automatically linking the button clicked here to the button clicked up here. Okay, now it's saying console log out, oh no, it's been clicked. So these two, even though they're all in the same file, we're able to link the functions that run when our events happen straight to our HTML events. Zach, I'm not ignoring your question, by the way. We are going to duplicate all of this. Any other questions for review on tonight before we move forward? You feel like we're understanding this code. We're feeling like when we look at this, there aren't any questions. We're feeling that we understand teacher is that's a weird kind of syntax, but what React is doing is allowing us to use our component down here by using this syntax up here. And then any additional information that we're passing into our teacher is coming in through the prompts. Okay, we're going to move on to the next step here. Now, when we are running this project, I've got this going on in the terminal, right? And because I am about to switch into a different project, open a different folder, it's always a good idea to stop the terminal before you go start another React app. So while I'm down here, I'm going to hit Control C. And this time we actually mean control, we don't mean command. And what that's going to do is it's going to tell the server to stop. So now if I have localhost running 3000 over here and refresh it, it's going to say the site can't be reached. Control C is the way that we can tell the React server that is making our localhost 3000 work, hey, we don't need you anymore. You can go ahead and stop. So I'm going to go into Finder. I'm going to go to my desktop, my code, week 12, day 3. I'm actually going to right click on day 3 and duplicate the whole thing, which may take a moment because I've got all of my node modules inside my day 3 folder that are copying over to day 4 as well. So we're going to give this a minute. I do recommend everyone follow along just so you've got your day 4 created. We're going to do 2 projects tonight. We're going to cover some additional concepts. Those concepts are on the outline: state, conditional rendering, lists and keys, and forms. And once we get all of that done, we are going to pop open our regular, what we call vanilla JavaScript, or JavaScript without a framework. And we're going to start layering in React and taking all of that we had working in our weather app, moving it into React and identifying piece by piece what we need to modify to make it a little bit more Reacty. So as soon as I have my day 3 copy, I'm going to rename that as day 4. And now in my day 4, I've got my playground. We're going to reuse the playground, but when we get to the weather app, we're going to create a new React app. Just so you guys know, we're going to have 2 folders in there. Okay. In my day 4, I'm going to just drag that right to my VS Code, and VS Code is going to open up my day 4 for me. I'm then going to right-click on my package.json. I'm right-clicking on package.json because it's automatically in my playground folder for me. And I'm going to open an integrated terminal. And once I have it in my terminal, I'm going to npm run start and give that a second, and React script should fire up, open localhost 3000 for me, and have this number of times the button was click 0, click me button. I'm going to pull there. I know it's a little early on, but I want to make sure no one gets lost in duplicating the folder. While we're working on these concepts, you don't absolutely have to follow along with me. So as we're going through state, conditional rendering, lists and keys and forms, if you don't want to follow along, that's completely fine. However, oh, I said to-do list instead of weather app. Maybe we're saving the weather app for next week. I forgot about to-do list. When we get to to-do list, that's when we'll probably want to have everyone follow along. Got 6 votes in. I think 10 is our magic number, but I know engagement varies night to night. So we'll just give everyone a minute, just making sure basically at this point that not only do we have our day 4 folder, but that we've got our code from last night up and running in the terminal. And that down here we can see compiled with warnings. And actually, we're going to clean this up really quickly. React is telling us, hey, source app.js, that's the file that we've been working in. Logo is defined but never used. Well, where is it defined? It's defined up here. This is our React logo, right? It's that atom that was spinning around. And what React is telling us is you're importing this thing up here, but you never use it. So we can actually go ahead and delete out that import. And now in our terminal, we're going to get rid of any warnings, and it's going to say compiled successfully. So warnings are never going to cause your code to like not work, but they're telling you, hey, you're importing something that you're not actually using. Might be a good idea to remove that. So all I did is I deleted the first line in app.js, that import SVG, and now we have green in our terminal. Christy, go ahead.
So I am still on, okay, so I have the playground copy. So it's okay to name the playground copy day 4?
It should say d3.copy or d3 copy. Did you copy your playground folder or did you copy your whole d3 folder?
I copied the playground.
Okay, we want to delete the copy of the playground.
Okay.
Go back up one level to day 3 and duplicate the entire day 3 folder.
I got you. Okay. All right. So I'm a little bit behind. Yeah. Okay.
What did you do again to get it to say compiled successfully?
I deleted the first line. There was a line that said import logo.svg. But we're not using that logo, and that's why the terminal is telling us, hey, there's a warning. You know, you're running some code that you're not, or you're importing some code that you're not using.
Okay, thank you.
Doug, go ahead.
Run
npm run start. Wayne.
Is it typical that the React file or the folder is like 300 megabytes? Is that pretty standard?
That is normal. The good news is it's not 300 megabytes when you actually deploy your site, because it basically compiles all of the dependencies down into a very small file. That is the process of building your site, right? Taking whatever you're doing in dev and building it into your production version that you're going to then go out and deploy. However, development, it is a space hog, and any Create React app that you have is going to be huge, and that's because of all the dependencies in node modules. So if you actually take a look in Finder and look in Playground and your source folder, it's only 6 kilobytes. It's actually really small. That's where all of our actual JSX code is. But when you look in node modules, it's a chunker. It's going to come in at 295 megabytes. And that is all of the dependencies of React, including React itself, that are making the entire application bigger. So I'm kind of curious. Nathan's going to get into this, but if I npm run build, what it's going to do is create a production version of whatever we've built in our React. And so if we take a look in the build folder, it comes down to 545 kilobytes. So all 300 meg of node modules, while we need it for development, it gets sucked all the way down into 551 kilobytes when we actually go to deploy it. So half a meg when we send our React app out to the internet, but as we're working on it, we need all 300 meg to make sure our debug tools are working and we're seeing that whole process going on.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I wanted to make sure I didn't accidentally include something that I wasn't supposed to.
No, and that's why that duplicate takes so long, is because it's duplicating everything in node modules, and even node modules, each individual file in it is tiny, but there are like hundreds of thousands of independent files in node modules, and that's why it takes so long to duplicate all of them.
And once you build, can you get rid, I guess if you get rid of the node modules and you say, oh, you know what, I really want to work, I want to do something else and change that, can you bring in a new node modules and work further?
You can, whenever you delete your node modules, you can always reinstall them or regenerate them by just running npm on.
npm what?
I
I
for install, npm install or npm space I. I is just the alias for it. But what that's going to do is take everything in your package.json and reinstall it for you, which is going to regenerate your node modules.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, looks like we are going to roll forward here. Any other questions? Okay, so I'm not going to actively pull from this, but everything that I'm covering is from the React concepts, right? So if we open that link from the outline for tonight, or go to reactjs.org, click on docs and go over to the main concepts, everything I'm covering is over here tonight, right? So I put on the outline what number it is in the outline. Handling events, I skipped just because we've already done that last night, but everything I'm covering is in here. So if you are someone who learns concepts better by reading, as opposed to seeing me do it, these are the things that you will want to read through this weekend to make sure you fully understand it. But state is kind of interesting. It's like a variable on steroids, or a variable that reacts to changes, right? And so whenever we think about React is one of those things that is very well named, because React is all about either reacting to events or reacting to data changes. So in order to get our function here working, right, we've got our app working here, and we have number of times the button was clicked 0, click me. And when we hit click me, what happens is we get, oh no, it's been clicked in our browser, but that number doesn't increase. So how would we increase that number without React? How would we do that in our normal JavaScript?
+1 or plus?
We would do plus, but what would we have to use? How would we get our JavaScript to actually update our HTML?
We'd have to do like a for loop, some kind of loop, maybe, no?
Not a loop. In our JavaScript, how do we get vanilla JavaScript, our basic no framework JavaScript, to update our HTML? What property or what function do we use?
We
Is it an
That's it.
array? or-
Yeah,
our HTML.
In our HTML and get element by ID, right? Because our JavaScript and our HTML are very much separated. So whenever we want our JavaScript to update our HTML, we have to get the element that we're updating first. And then once we get that element, we can change the inner HTML in our JavaScript to reflect whatever we want. But we're blurring a lot of those lines, right? In React, because we've got our JavaScript right in our HTML, things are a little different here. So what we're going to do is use this concept called state. But in order to do that, we need to tell React, hey, useState is something coming from the React framework. So what we're going to do is up here, we're going to use this import keyword. And when we're importing, we are going to import useState. And it needs to know where we're importing that from. We're importing that from React itself. Okay, so import, that's saying pull something from our NPM package. We use require and import very closely related. They're actually two different versions to accomplish the same thing. Now we're going to say useState. useState is the part of the React package that we're pulling out. That's saying, hey, useState is something that React knows how to do. That's what we're trying to get to. But now we need to tell it, where is useState coming from? useState is coming from React itself. Okay, we haven't used it anywhere. We're just telling our application, hey, we want to be able to use state. And in order to be able to use the state, we've got to be able to import it and pull that functionality in from React. Now we're going to come down here and useState is a JavaScript function, right? So we're going to do that in our JavaScript portion of our component. Down here, we've got our HTML function. That's what's returning. That's what's showing up. But up here, because it's before the return, we've got our JavaScript going on. So what we're going to do is, moving this comment so it's out of the way. We are going to say const. Now we know const, right? Just declaring a variable. But useState is a little unique. useState, the value of whatever we're storing in the state is going to be one value coming out of useState, but a function called set is going to be the second value coming out of our useState. So whenever we set a value into our state, React knows, hey, magically go redo this return and update the parts that you need to. Okay, I know that's a lot to take in. I think it will click a little bit more once we get through using it. So in this const up here, we're going to say num clicked and set num clicked. And all of that is going to be equal to our useState with the parentheses. And those parentheses are going to contain our initial value of num clicked. Okay, all of this doesn't make sense yet. Once we get it working, we'll go back and go step by step and make sure we understand it. Now in our event, whenever the button is clicked, we want to set the num clicked to whatever the num clicked is plus 1. And then finally, we're going to come down to our HTML and say, we don't want 0 to show up all the time. We want something JavaScripty to happen. So we're going to put in our curly braces. And inside our curly braces, we're going to put num clicked. No, that was a lot. I'm going to save. Come over here. We're going to click on click me. And we get 1 to change. And we're going to click on it again and we get 2. Okay, so let's break this down. What's happening here? We are going to, first things first, in order to be able to use state here, we need to take it from the React package here and import it into our code so that when we say use state, it knows state is going to be a function. Zach, good question. I will answer you in 1 second. Okay, now we've got use state. So we come down here and say use state for the first time. We know that that is a function coming from React. React has set up state for us. It's built right into it. Now we're going to do the parentheses 0 here. And what that's going to do is set state to the initial value of 0. That means that num clicked here is starting out as 0. But state is a little unique in that we can't just say num clicked equals 1 or num clicked equals 2. We have to use this set num clicked whenever we want to update the value of num clicked. So the first time this page loads, num clicked starts out as 0, and we say this is an event that hasn't happened yet, so we ignore it. We come down into our return. We start building out our div. We hit this first curly brace here, and it says now we've got some JavaScript value coming in. Num clicked is 0, so make 0 show up here. Okay, so when we look at all of that, and we look in our code for the first time and refresh the page, we have number of times clicked 0, click me. Okay, that is coming through our use state. Use state has the initial value. The initial value is getting stored in num clicked. When we come down to our return, we've got num clicked, and the number 0 is actually showing up because we have it in curly braces in our JSX. That's part 1. Part two, now we come in here and we say, hey, when our button is clicked, go do the stuff up here. Okay, now come in and set num clicked. Well, where's set num click coming from? That's coming from this other part of the state. And so these two are linked, and now the parameters of set num clicked are going to be whatever the new value of num clicked is supposed to be. So we take num clicked, which is coming from this part of our state. Okay, that's 0 because that was our initial value, and we're adding 1 to it. Okay, now num clicked is going to be 1. So now we take whatever the value is here and store it back into our num clicked. Okay, all of that's a lot, but what didn't we have to do? We didn't have to get element by ID. We didn't have to do inner HTML. Because we use set num clicked here, which is a special function, React knows, hey, go rerun whatever code is in this return and make the new value of num clicked show up right here. The reason why we can't do num clicked ++ is that we never are supposed to adjust the value of num clicked without using the set. This set is the magic that is going to make the num clicked automatically update in our HTML. So if we just did num clicked ++ and then console log out our num clicked, when we click the button, it's going to yell at us and it's going to say assignment to a constant variable. It's saying, no, you're not supposed to modify num clicked on your own. What you're supposed to do is use this set num clicked instead. And what that's going to do is not only update your num clicked here, it's going to know to come back down in our return and make the right value show up here. Okay, that's a lot. We're going to stop and we're going to do a poll. Now, the question should not be, are you able to get your code working? It should be, do you understand how this code is working? Because we're still at the conceptual level, right? We're going to have practice later tonight, making all of this happen at the actual hands-on level. But if you are following along with me, go ahead and catch up on state. Make sure that you understand how this is working. And again, the most important concept to understand here is that we don't modify num click the way we normally would, right? Normally we could come down here and we could say num clicked equals num clicked +1 or num clicked ++. But num click is always a constant. The only way we update the value of num clicked is by using this set function. And because we're using this set function, it knows to automatically come down to our HTML and make whatever the new value is that we're setting reflect what we have set. May feel like we're going a little slow, but we only have like 3 more concepts left in all of React, and then we're going to go hard on using that. So if you have any questions about the conceptual here, now's the time to ask that.
I don't have a question, but can you go over it again?
Sure.
Okay.
So what we're doing is, first things first, we have to import use state. Use state is coming from React. React does all kinds of black magic voodoo under the hood to make state work. So what we do is we import that in, right? We say, pull that in from React. React's going to take care of use state for me. Now, when we come down, before we use the state, we've got to initialize the state. We've got to set it up. So what we do, useState returns two different things. Because it returns two things, that's why we need these square brackets here, because it's giving us access to two different things. The first thing that it gives us access to is num clicked. Num clicked is a constant that actually is tracking the value. That's what has 1, 2, 3, whatever in it, right? But then there's also set num clicked, because whenever we're working with state, we don't just say num clicked equals whatever the new value is that we want. Instead, we use this function, and that function is what's kicking off all the magic behind the scenes to make our HTML automatically update. Now we're going to say equal useState. That's coming in from our import up here. And what's happening down in the parentheses is the initial value. So we're saying, hey, when we first start using this code, num clicked is going to equal 0. Now we ignore this button clicked because it's a function. We haven't called it yet. And when we're down in our JSX, we use num clicked. And because it's in the curly braces, JSX knows, hey, that's some JavaScript that I need to drop in there, make 0 show up. Okay. Now that we've done all of that, we have a on-click button clicked. When we click on that button, we come up to the function up here. That function is saying, what do you want me to do? I would like you to set num clicked. Because we use set num clicked instead of num clicked equals, React knows, hey, based off of whatever value is in here, go back through into your return function here and make the new value of num clicked show up. So we take num clicked, which is the number 0, we add 1 to it, and then because we use this set function, num clicked up here is now going to equal 1. So we take that 1, we come back down into our return HTML, and the 1 is what shows up here.
Okay, now I do have a question. So
Too bad, we're moving on. Just
for
kidding,
the
go.
prompt, num click, set num click, that looks like an array.
It's an array. This is a concept called array destructuring, which I don't want to get too far into, but the problem here is useState is returning two things out to us, right? It's returning this constant that isn't supposed to change, but then it's also giving us this function that does let us change num clicked. The problem is it's giving us two things, but when you return from a function, we can only return one thing from a function. So what these array, the square brackets are doing is saying, hey, there are two things coming out of useState. The two things coming out of useState are the number and the function to update that number. And the brackets are what is telling our JavaScript, hey, because there are two things coming out of it, that's how we can kind of pull them apart and get each one of them.
Okay.
Zach, go ahead.
So what exactly is useState? I know you're saying it's coming from React, but what exactly does it do? Like in more of a general sense, I know what it's doing here.
What it's doing here is the general concept of state. State is a variable, a special variable set up by React. And whenever we update the state or just change the state, it knows to automatically rerun our return here to have our HTML, really our JSX, to reflect the values in state. So whenever we have a variable that can change, and that variable is being shown in our HTML down here, we need to use state instead of using a basic JavaScript variable. And the reasoning behind that is, let's say we just said, let num equal 0. And down here, we just use num. And then we say in here, instead of set num clicked, we're just going to say num plus plus console log num. Okay, well, we're here and we click me. Let me refresh. We click me and it says 1. We hit click me again and it says 2. Well, it's incrementing and we see it incrementing because 0 and it's console logging out num, right? And we've made it to 2, so it's incrementing. But because this variable is not coming from state, it does not know, hey, go ahead and update our HTML to reflect that. So instead, what we do is we use state, and in using this set num clicked, it knows this function is going to automatically re-trigger this return and make num clicked, because that is in state, to reflect the value that we actually want. And so now when we come back and go back in, it automatically updates.
Okay, thank you.
The concept of saying use state, there are a couple other similar concepts in React. We will touch on them a little bit later, but this is called a React hook. In other words, we're hooking into some functionality that React is giving us. And because we're hooking into that, React is doing that magic behind the scenes to make num clicked automatically update.
Can you just say one more time the reason why you'd use that React versus, because you said it before you went to explain. I was trying to
So
memorize
if
that.
we use the regular num here, and then we just add 1 to num, the problem is it isn't going to make this return update automatically. So when we keep on adding 1 to num, it keeps adding and adding it, and JavaScript is keeping track of it, but our HTML isn't updating it. And so why we use state is we store the value in num clicked, but whenever we update that value, this set num clicked is a special part of the state that knows to go back to our return and re-update that value based off of whatever we're setting in. So the whole .inner HTML and the whole get element by ID is not necessary, because our data is tied into the state. Whenever we update the state using this set, it knows to automatically update our HTML based off of the values that are now in the state. Because otherwise, those values are just coming from JavaScript, and our JavaScript and our HTML don't talk together, right? They're put together, but when we use state, all of a sudden React knows, hey, that's the value that I need to update in the HTML when it gets set in using the JavaScript. Okay. Good to move on. We are going to get practice with all of this with our to-do list app tonight. The goal is to get all the concepts done by 7 o'clock so that by 7:20, we're ready to rip and ready to build something in React.
Hey, so I was driving and I'm trying to set up my React app and I keep getting errors.
Okay, did you duplicate off of day 3?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead and share your screen quickly. I only have a minute or two because we can't spend too much time, but let's take a quick look.
Mm-hmm. I'm just doing npm run start, right?
Do an ls really quickly. Okay, you've got a playground folder inside of a playground folder.
Okay. Okay.
So if you move your whatever's inside of your inner playground folder into your outer playground folder, your npm run start should work.
Okay. All right, I'll just try that, and I'll hit you in the chat if something comes up.
Cool. Yeah, Ariel should be able to go into a breakout room with you if you need help, and she can help you get going.
Okay.
Larry, go ahead.
I need to share my screen so you can see my screen, Max.
Yep, you're good.
All right, so now my code works. And
Okay.
as soon as I go to VS Code and I comment out the line currents num clicked,
Yep.
my code
Use state is a function. So because use state is a function, we want to use curly braces, not squares.
state.
I'm sorry, parentheses, not curly
Oh.
braces. That should get you going. Any other questions on that? Ariel, it looks like Nicole wants to go into a breakout room. If you have did we lose Ariel? Oh, okay, we lost Ariel. She probably does not have power or is in a breakout room already. Let's see. No, she's not. We lost her. Okay, we're gonna keep going here a little bit, and then during the break, we can help you guys catch up if you need additional help there. Okay, so we are moving on to the next concept, which is conditional rendering. So let's say we want something to show up when our number of times we click the button is 5 or greater, and if it's less than 5, we want them to keep on hitting the button. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, in here, we can say if the num clicked is greater than 5. Now we're in our JavaScript, right? We're before our return. We can say return a h1, stop clicking my button. Okay. Well, when we come back over here and we look at our code, num times button was clicked is 3. If I click it again, I get 4, I get 5, and I click it again, everything changes. Okay, why? Because we hit a return. Our returns work just like returns in regular functions. Once this return runs, nothing down here is going to run. Okay, but when we first loaded this, we see everything and everything's fine. Well, this use state here is starting out as 0. So every time that we click the button, not only are we updating the num clicked, we're checking this whole function over again, and we're seeing if num clicked is greater than 5. And if it is, it's going to hit this return just like always in JavaScript, stops everything and makes only this part show up. So based off of what value is true, we can change what renders, what comes outside of our component. So when we come here and we hit click me, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now, once we get num clicked over 5, it's going to hit this return. Nothing down here is going to run. And instead of seeing this whole div, we're only going to see this h1.
I have a question.
Yes.
And I know I asked this before, but I want to make sure with before. When you are, does it matter what order it is in VS Code? Like, for example, that if num clicked, if you had that, does it matter where, like, the way you have your code, the code out, and then you scroll down?
So yes and no. It
Okay.
does matter, but there are parts of it that don't matter. So I can take my num clicked and I can move that up here.
So your if statement can be anywhere?
Not necessarily. So I can put that if statement up there and that runs fine because num clicked is defined right here.
Oh, I see.
But if I take that num clicked and I move it down to here, I immediately get an error that says, whoa, what's happening here? You're referencing num clicked, but I don't know what num clicked is yet. So num clicked has to go up here. However, in general, the rule of thumb is that functions can go anywhere as long as they are before your return.
Okay.
right? Because this function doesn't really run, nothing happens in this until this on click happens. That click is never going to happen until they can see that button in the HTML. So because of that, it can really go almost anywhere. However, we know that anything after a return never runs. So if I console log hi here, we're never going to see hi because that return runs and it's done working with the function. So VS Code actually grays that out for me. But if I take this hi and put it before the return, then I'm going to see hi in my console. Larry, go ahead.
Max, so all the functions that we're going to use in this app JS, do they all have to be defined inside of the app JS function component?
No, they do not. They all don't have to be in the app.js file. We are going to practice moving components to different files next week. However, they do have to be called at some point, right? So if we make down here, we make our function called my lonely component, and it just returns.
Will we have to import it up top there?
If we move it into a different file, absolutely, we have to import it up at the top. But we could declare a whole function, my lonely component here, and because that it's not used in teacher and it's not used in app, this is never going to show up. However, we could move that into a separate file. And if we imported it, we could use it in either our teacher component or our app component, and then it would show up. But we will visit that concept next week.
Right, so basically the way it is, because it's defined outside of the thing, we can't use it, period, for now.
Correct. Any other questions?
I have a question. So does that code at the top of the app component, does it get rerun or no, inside the app component? Does it get rerun every time state changes? Because the if num clicked is greater than 5 has to be run. But
everything except our hooks get rerun.
Okay, and the setting up the state is a hook.
Correct. Anything
that's
with
with React
use in front
only.
of it is a hook.
In React.
Coming from React, yes, in React.
Okay.
All right, thank you. So the button clicked function that gets redeclared each
Correct.
time, everything. Okay, thank you.
But because it's a function, it's no big deal to make it be redeclared. But it would cause problems if we used our let num in here, because that's always going to be rerun. And so that's why it's important whenever we're using variables that are reflecting data in our HTML to use state instead of trying to use a variable. Now you get into some gray area when you declare variables up here, but that's advanced React. That's very advanced React.
Can you leave this like this for a second so I can
Yep.
get if none clicked less than 5?
So we've got one more thing to do with conditional rendering before we move on to our listing keys and forms, and then we will be through all of our React concepts, at least what we need to make a full React app.
Okay.
Oh no, I needed to sneeze so bad that I waited to find my mute button. Now I don't have to sneeze again. Okay, moving on to the next thing. All right, now we have to talk about ternary operators. Ternary operators are basically inline if statements, and you should have hit ternary operators somewhere in your free code camp. Ternary operators are the question mark and the colon syntax. So if this thing is true, make the left side of the colon show up. And if it's not true, make the right side of the colon show up, right? So if we come down here and we want to say, we're going to use some curly braces because we're using our JavaScript. Ternary is a JavaScript concept. And if we want to say, if the number of times clicked is less than 2, you're going to say the question mark and say, only clicked a couple times. Otherwise, clicked a fair amount. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into our React and it says only clicked a couple times. Well, why is that true? Because num clicked is starting out as 0. Now it's going to say num clicked is less than 2. So use what comes right after the question mark. We're going to ignore whatever is in here and show this instead. So I come over here, I hit click me, I get 1, only clicked a couple times, I get 2. Now I get clicked a fair amount. Okay, well, the num clicked is not less than 2, it is 2. So show the other part here. So this is a way to do an inline if statement, but this is not going to override the num clicked greater than 5 because this comes before our return down here. So if we still keep clicking, we're going to still get stop clicking my button. But this is basically a way of conditionally rendering something. So what we could do is do a giant section of our HTML. We could take this whole thing and say, hey, we're going to put all of that in a div. And in that div is going to be all of our stuff. So now that we're in here, again, you don't have to be following along with this. This is more concept. Now we're in here and we say, click me, and it says 1. But notice all of our teacher stuff isn't showing up because our num clicked is less than 1. So all we're going to show up is this only clicked a couple times. But as soon as we get to 2, boom, all of our teacher stuff shows up. This only clicked a couple times disappears, and we get all of this code in here. So this is a way for us to conditionally show different parts, different divs, different entire sections of HTML based off of what is true inside of this div, inside of this ternary operator. Any questions on that?
So Max, if you had like a survey that had required fields,
Yep.
but some of them were not applicable, so they can answer those. You can use this. Hold on one second, y'all. You can use this to basically make those questions disappear if they click non-applicable, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on. So we've got conditional rendering going on. Now we're going to go into Conditional renderings, everything we covered in here, the general notion of, hey, we can put an if we put the return in, that we're not going to get whatever is down here, we're going to get this instead. And then we can also do that. I'm guessing they're going to cover it, yeah, eventually with ternary operators. So it could be something as simple as only make this word show up, or it could be something as advanced as, hey, we've got this entire section of the page that we shouldn't show. So it's very common to hide things if a user is not logged in, and if they are logged in, give them additional nav links or something like that. Okay, I'm going to move on to arrays here. So let's say that we've got an array, and I've got my const students. My students are going to be Larry, Doug, and Christy. I love you all equally as students, but those are just the first three names that came to mind. Okay, well, we know that we can come down into our JavaScript and we can make their names show up by using our curly braces. So if I say students down here and go look at my React app, I get Larry, Doug, and Christy all put together. But what if I would like them to show up as bullet points instead? Well, we know that students is an array, so we could kind of do a for loop, but there's a way to do an inline for loop, and that is called a map in React. So in React, we can say students map over each one of these students, essentially loop over each one of the students. And as we're looping over them, I get access to each individual student. Okay, now what would you like to do with each one of those students? I would like to return a list item. And not type atrociously. Okay, now in that list item, I would like the student's name to show up. So now when we come back over, student, there we go. Now we get all three names showing up as a list item. Okay, that's a mind-blowing React concept. I don't expect you to fully take in and appreciate what that React concept is entirely, but let me explain it all the way through. Students up here is just a regular, oh, come on, let me draw zoom, is just a regular array, right? This is, we could type this straight into JavaScript, nothing would change. And in fact, map is a JavaScript concept as well. Map is just like a for loop. So what it's doing is it's running over students, and as it gets whoever the first student is, it's going to give me access to that in the student right here. Now, whatever is in these curly braces is going to run for each student. So what it's doing is it's taking a return and it's putting that student in a list item. Now, student is coming right up from here, which is coming up from our students, which is, of course, coming from our whole array up here. So what we just did is we said, go over each one of these students, drop them into the student parameter coming in from our map. And as we're working on the map, go ahead and return out the list item. Just put everything in an LI and put the student's name in there. And these curly braces are, again, telling JSX, hey, you're doing something JavaScript-y here. So when we actually look in our browser, all we get here, all we see is the three list items with the three names in them. Right? We see the LI, we see the name, and that's all we see. But React is generating that out based off of this map, which is just another way to loop. we are mapping them into the list items. Okay, that seems like a really basic concept. We're gonna get more exposure to that. That is really, really powerful and something that I can't underestimate how cool it is in React to be able to loop over something and have that show up. But we're gonna get into that in a second. Gonna get a little bit more practice. Any question on our map? Understanding that, hey, we've got an array over here. We want to loop over the whole array. So we have our curly brace saying, hey, we're going to do something JavaScripty. Map is saying go over each one of the student, go over each item in the array and give me access to each individual one. And then we're going to have our curly braces here, and we are going to return. What are we returning? What the thing is that we want to show up for each one of these students. What we would like to show up is a list item, and then we would like their name to show up. So we have the curly brace here again. That's saying, hey, I'm not sending you regular HTML. I want you to drop in the value of the student, and that's what I'm putting in there. Okay, last concept that we need to cover is forms. Now, forms, we're going to get a little interesting here. We're going to combine our practice with state with events. So if we come in here, we can add an input just like we can in HTML. We can say input type equals text. And we're over here and we're going blah, blah, blah. And we can type in blah, and that's all fine. But how do I get blah? How do I store blah in my React so I can use that value, right?
Max,
Yes.
sorry to cut you.
No, go ahead.
There's a warning. Each child in a list should have a unique key property.
It should. So we can solve that. I knew that was going to come up, but I didn't really want to explain it, but I will anyway. Where is?
Can I?
No. It's where did my terminal go? Okay. If I save that and refresh. Okay, so in the console, we've got this big warning, right? That says each child in the list should have a unique key prop. Key is a special thing that React uses in order to keep track of, hey, when that array updates, do I need to update this person's name? It's basically a unique identifier so that we're helping React know, hey, what do I need to update here? So what we can do to solve that is whatever gets returned, the top most broad parent element gets an attribute called key, and then we're going to pass in the student's name for that. And this is basically helping React out by telling them, hey, when the student's list gets updated at some point, look at the key to figure out what parts of that list need to be updated. So if you come back over here and refresh, you'll see that warning went away. Larry, stop asking good questions, would you? If you had two students with the same name, you would have to use a different key. So you could use something like an index. However, indexes are not typically encouraged to use as a key, because if you remove an index at the middle and all the names get shifted over, now all of a sudden React thinks they need to re-render all of them instead of just removing that one key that you removed. So the good news is typically when we loop over data, in React, we tend to be looping over data coming in from our API. And when we're pulling that data in from our API, oftentimes the API has an ID associated with it. However, when you are working with data that does not have an ID, you do have to get clever on a key and either be working with some piece of data that's going to be unique or generate your own ID while you're using that. Yes, in your Wegmans response, you would definitely get back IDs. IDs are helpful for not only your front end to keep track of what information it is showing, but also for you to do what is called CRUD operations, create, read, update, and delete. And those are done through gets and posts and delete and puts and all of that fun stuff in your methods. And actually, based off of the ID format that you get back from their API, oftentimes you can tell what kind of database they're using, whether they're using SQL or a non-relational database based off of the ID that they use. Not always, it's not a, but side note there. Okay, we understanding the map and the part of the key, which is basically helping React keep track of what we have rendered out.
Yes. Yes.
Cool. There's like a big bad rainstorm that only lasted for like 15 minutes. I wanted more rain. Okay, we are right at 6:58. I've been bombarding you with concepts. When we come back, we're going to touch on the last thing with forms. We are going to combine our events with our state, and then we're going to create React app, which is called craw, and we are going to craw ourselves right into a to-do list app and get some hands-on experience, and hopefully not keep boring you guys with all of these concepts. Believe it or not, all of React covered in these 12 concepts, and we've already covered most of them. So we're going to get some hands-on experience after the break, right after we touch on our last concept with forms. We'll take a break now and see you guys at 7:20. And I'll stick around for a couple minutes in case anyone has questions. So forms in React are a little unique. Basically, what we're going to be doing is combining the on-click events that we just used for getting our on-click to work here with our state, which we used up here for the num clicked. And all of this is to keep track of the value of whatever's in the input, right? So let's say that I would like, I added my input type text here, but I would like to make it so that when my button is clicked on, it's going to log out the value of the text. Well, in order to do that, we need to be able to first have the value that it's going to get stored in, right? So I'm going to come up here. I'm going to say const text input, or let's just call it value, and set value is equal to use state. And what's my state going to start out as? Well, I want my input to be empty when we first load it. So I'm going to put in empty quotes there. Okay, now we've got to use this thing that we just set up. Well, I'm going to come down and I'm going to say, hey, the value of our text input is going to be the value coming from our state up here. Okay, well, I come down over here and I go into my React app and I refresh and I type in A. Well, I can't type anything. That's because I set the value here. I said the value of this is always going to be whatever is coming from the state. The problem is that we didn't ever tell it a way to change that value. So what we're going to do is we're going to say on change, and we're going to say that is going to say text inputted. Now we have to define our text inputted. So we're going to come up here and we're going to say const text inputted is going to be a new function that takes our event. Oh, wait a minute, event. We worked with events before a little bit. What if we just console log out the event target value? Now I come back over here, I refresh, I come in here, I type the letter A in, and I get A showing up. Okay, we're on the right track. We're almost there. What happens if instead of console logging it, I set the value to whatever the event target value is? So I come back over here. Now I type in ABC. Whoa, we get values. All right, this is one giant circle. Let's see if I can fit it all on my screen. Okay, we start up at the top. Okay, so we start at the top here and we say value. Oh, no. Sorry, I'm in the wrong mode. Okay, we say value and set value. Those are both coming from our use state, which we know is coming higher up the page from our imports. Okay, we've got this set up, so we can use that eventually. Now we ignore all of our functions here and we come down to our input. Our input is saying the value. Where is the value coming from? That is coming from our set state. But, or our use state, excuse me, but we didn't give it any way to update that value in the state. So what we do is we use our onChange method. Our onChange method built right into JavaScript, nothing special about that. But we link it to our text inputted, which is coming from here. Now, when that onChange event happens, it's dumping the event details of that. The event details are the event target. That's going to be our whole input down here. And what we want to do is we want to get out the value from the event, right? When they typed in that text input, what did they type in? What was that value? Once we get that whole thing out, we call set value here. Well, where does set value come from? That is coming from our state up here. But what do we know about whenever we update state? When we update the state, it's going to trigger our return to rerun down here, and our value all of a sudden is magically going to get this value and send it in right here. And that is going to happen for every single letter that we type. What all of that means is that now we've got access to our value in our state. So when we click our button here, we can just throw a console login to output the value. So when we come over here and we say ABC1 and we click the button, we get ABC1 out. And if I type in new text here and hit the button, I get new text here. Okay, one of these concepts where it's only a couple lines of code, but it's really freaking complex, right? So what we're doing here, let's go through this all over again. We pull out our use state. Our use state has empty quotes in it. That's saying start out as a blank string. That means value is a blank string, but we have access to set value. We use set value whenever we have some information in our state that we would like to update so it is reflected in our HTML. We come down and we've got our input type text. That's regular HTML, no problem. Then we say the value. What is the value of this input? It is going to come from our state up here. The problem is we need some way to be able to update that state. So what do? We hook into the onChange. This onChange is a regular JavaScript event that fires after every letter is pressed. After every time this input gets changed, this event is going to fire. Okay, what do we want to hook it up to? We want to hook it up to this text inputted. The text inputted is going to receive the event from the onChange. Once we receive that event, we're going to go in, get the target and the value. go get the input and go pull the value out of this onChange event. This value is going to be whatever is typed in to our input text box. We then take that value and set it into the state. Well, because we set it into the state, it is going to come down into this return, know that this value is different, and make it update here. And we can see all of that happening. I think I probably should have tested this in advance. Yes. So that when we type in the number 1, we see the value updates right in our HTML. If we type in 2, our value is now 1, 2.
Hey, Max.
Yeah, I know.
All
Okay,
right.
so what we need to do is check to make sure you've got your onChange and your value added down here. Make sure that you've got your value and your set value here. Make sure you've got an event coming in, because this is where the details are of what the new text inputs value is. And then make sure you're setting the value into whatever the state hook is that we're using up here. And if you're doing all of that, go ahead and share your screen. Go to your browser and refresh. And go to your input and just type a letter in. You're muted, Zach, if you're talking to us.
I didn't say anything.
Oh, okay. Oh, yours is working. Go back to your code. What you're missing is in the button clicked, the console log value, but that button clicked is linked to the button that is incrementing 1. So what you would have to do is, if you go back to your code, back to your browser and go into the console. Now, if you click the click me button, you're going to get whatever's put into the input.
Oh, okay.
So we just put that console log into the button. So it wasn't console logging out every time we typed the letter. We just made that console log happen on the button. So think about the button as being like a submit form. And that's how we would pull the inputs, the values of the inputs everywhere out of the form.
Okay, thank you.
Stephanie, did that answer your question as well?
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm not sure because it's looking a little funky, but is it okay if I share?
Yep. If a playground doesn't look funky, you're doing something wrong. So click in your input and just try and type a letter. Okay, so you've got your value and your onChange working. And now if you hit the click me button, now you get A coming out in the console.
Okay, so it's the same thing. We just had to click me. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
No, you're fine. And that's a good reminder. The reason we have to click me is because I put the console log value in this button clicked. But sometimes you have to work in reverse. When is this button clicked happening? It's happening on click of the click me button.
So, I'm missing some lines of code.
You want to share your screen?
Well, no, I just need to get them, like you moving, so
Okay, sorry. So here, I'm going to dump this in live stream so you have it, because we are actually done in the playground. We're going to do no more concepts in here, but major things I changed. The line 8 right here, I had to add the value in because we need to keep track of that in the state. I added a console log value into my button clicked.
Okay.
I added this context inputted, and all of this is doing is taking that data from the event and dumping it into the state for me. And then the final thing that I did was on this input, we make sure we've got the value and the on change, right? The value is what is tying it to the state. The on change is what is running this function up here and converting the event, that on change, into getting the value out of it and setting it into my state.
Okay.
Having to do this in forms was the most frustrating part of me learning React. So if you are frustrated about it here, that's okay, that's normal. We're gonna practice in our to-do app. We're gonna get a better handle of that. And then when we go into Monday, we're going to be able to have the skills to take existing things that we've already done, like the weather app, and convert it into a React app, which we are hoping that you're going to do for your capstone. Although I will say using React for your capstone is encouraged, but not required. So if you're already making progress and you get to the end of React this week, next week, and you're like, I get it, it's cool, I want to keep going on my capstone the way it is, you can do that, but we encourage you to do your capstone in React just to have the practice on that. Stephanie, go ahead.
I noticed something when we were sharing screens. How come mine how come mine just says the list and I don't have the names of the teacher anymore? Let me
Oh,
see.
we did a let me refresh. So we did an if statement up here.
Yeah.
And then we also came down here, and now I said if num clicked is less than 2, only show only clicked a couple times.
Mhm.
But if it is greater than that, show all of the teacher information.
Gotcha. Okay.
So if I click on this 2 times, I get all of my teachers back.
I see.
But that's like a important thing to understand why it's doing that in my code, but not a super important thing for your code to be doing it, because we are finally now done with the concepts, right? So like we've gotten through everything we need to know about React in order to actually start using it. So I think we're going to spend the next 45 minutes cranking that speed dial up, right? It felt a little slow. It felt like we were getting it all. Everything was nice. And we thought we were going to end out the week with a nice, everything's going fine. And now we're slamming down the accelerator and we are going to build an entire React app from scratch. Please try to contain all of that excitement. Okay. Okay, we are going to close out of VS Code, and I'm going to pop open terminal. I always like creating my React app in regular terminal instead of doing it in the VS Code one, just because like I feel like the regular terminal.
It's Tulia talking.
What's that? Okay. So I'm going to dive in here. I opened up my terminal to do this command space, command space, type in terminal, hit enter. We get into our terminal. I'm going to pwd, and I'm in my hack upstate folder, so I can ls to see where I'm at. I'm going to cd into my desktop. I'm going to ls again, and I have my code folder here. I'm going to cd into my code. And everyone should hopefully be following along on this, because this is your only assignment for the entire week, right? We are just turning in this to-do list app because this is going to hit on all of the concepts that we have practiced and learned with React all the way up until this point. So I'm going to ls here, and I see I've already got my week 12 folder. So I'm going to go into week 12. I'm going to ls. I've already got my day 4. And in my day 4 folder, I've got my playground here, right? But I don't want to be working in my playground. I want to create a new React app for my to-do. So I'm going to npx create React app. And then I am going to say to do. I'm going to hit enter on that, and it's going to go ahead and install React for me and get my whole project set up. Christy, go ahead with your question.
So I have the same thing from yesterday where it takes me, instead of terminal, it takes me back to playground node.
So hit Command N to open a new terminal window, and then just close out the other one and hit terminate.
Okay. Thank you.
Nicole, we were like, what are you talking about? Larry isn't talking. I do that all the time, though. I'll hit play and think my music is going to start, and some YouTube video starts instead, and it's like, where's the tab?
Yeah, I was so confused. And I'm like, where is the sound coming from? So many sounds.
Okay, so after we open the folder, you said do what?
You're going to CD all the way down to your week 12 day 4 folder. Once you're in week 12 day 4, we are going to npx create React app to do. And I will go ahead and screenshot this and share it in live stream. Except today I'm going to be smarter and share the right one instead of the one from a couple of days ago. So end result here, we can use a special command here. I know Larry's fancy and has these commands to automatically open it in VS Code. I go step by step a little bit. I say open space period, and that's going to pop open whatever our working directory is in terminal into our Finder. And so I'm going to take my to-do folder and drag it right into VS Code. Now, if that's too fancy, we can go File, Open folder, and we can just navigate through our desktop, my code, week 12, day 4, pop open our to-do, and now we're in here. We are done with this terminal, so we can go ahead and close this out. And then we are going to right-click on package.json, open an integrated terminal, npm run start. And finally, we should have our React app going on. If we do have that, we are good to go. If not, go ahead and raise your hand. I'm going to start a poll, make sure we are good to go. And then I'm coming towards you, Zach. Go ahead.
Mine didn't open in VS Code. I think I missed a step.
Oh, no, wait, when I fix it.
It's saying get master in to do.
You go ahead and share your screen.
It's just showing this.
Okay, so if you do open space period enter, that's going to pop open whatever folder you're in Finder. And then if you go, I like the column view personally more because it shows you kind of like where you're at. So if you switch into that one right there, now you can take this to-do folder and drag it to your VS Code in your doc.
Oh, okay.
And that's going to pop you right open into that folder. So you can right click on package.json, open an integrated terminal, and npm run start.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
Package.json.
Because once you click on it, it should
Cool. Thank you.
I have a quick question.
Yep.
If there's any answer question.
for it.
So if you are, so we're just going into the same folder. Just make sure.
We're going into the day 4 folder, but not into the playground folder.
Oh. Okay.
React's going to get really cranky if you create a React app in an already existing React app. I don't think it will let you do that. But
So, okay, so I think where I got messed up was, I made it, when I first got on, I made a day 4 folder. So should I make a day 5 folder?
no, we're in the day 4 folder, but in the day 4 folder, we should have a playground folder. And now we just created our to-do folder.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So it's just a to-do folder in VS Code.
We create React app to do. That's what sets it all up for us and creates that folder. And then in VS Code, we can open integrated terminal, npm run start, and get our React app running in the browser.
Wait, where was the npm run start? I didn't do that. I know I didn't do that.
In VS Code, I right-clicked on package.json and opened an integrated terminal.
Oh, okay.
And then I npm run start, and that's what gets me my React app over here.
Okay. That's the one thing I didn't do.
I got a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, do it? I don't want to delete my other folder. Is there a way for me to do an additional folder? Like create another folder, like from the terminal?
mkdir makes another folder in the terminal.
Oh, I thought that was deleted. Okay,
rm deletes, mkdir makes.
okay,
Hey.
all right. And should I just erase it all out because I was already in the day 4 folder?
I don't know what you have in the day 4 folder, so I can't say. If you didn't create a playground inside of your day 4 folder, it would probably be a good idea to do day 4 like -2 and put your new to do app in that one.
Okay, I was just trying to see if there was a way to like backspace it, but I got you.
Sometimes it's easier to just move files in Finder, and that's completely okay. But if you need help, you can go in a breakout room with Ariel.
No, it's fine.
Okay. You can move things in Finder, by the way. That's the MV command. But I have found oftentimes it is easier to move folders just in Finder than it is to do it in terminal, because you have to use relative folder paths and tell it where you want it to move to, and it gets a little messy. Okay.
So when I open up the to-do folder in VS Code, I should just be looking at a package.json and
over here, and then you're going to right click, open an integrated terminal. It's going to pop open terminal down here, and then you can npm run start.
okay.
Question, Max. You
Yep.
could the when you created the to-do, you could have started there and just open it from VS Code too, right?
Yep, that's fine. Yep, main goal is that we just have our React app running and that we're able to go into our SRC and see our code in here. If we're able to do that, we're ready to rock and roll. And if you've got the node server running in your regular terminal instead of your VS Code terminal, that's also completely fine.
Okay.
Max, can you put me and Danielle in a breakout room, please?
Done. Okay, we're gonna roll forward here. So just like always, we've got a bunch of stuff in our React app that we don't want. So I'm gonna open up my app.js and I'm going to delete out everything inside of the app tag. So we've got a blank slate. And I'm also going to go to my app.css, and there's a little shortcut that I can show you guys here. Instead of going over here and finding the file, if you hold in Command and click on the file path, it will pop it open for you automatically. And then I'm going to Command A and delete out everything in my app.css. So I come back to my app.js. We should have this blank slate. I'm just going to type in hello and save, and come over here and see my hello. and I am ready to rock and roll. So the goal here is to build a little to-do list app, right? And what we're going to do is have our input. Our input is going to tie into a value in state, which is going to require an event handler. Then once we save that answer in the state, we're going to use that to map over the data and make our list show up. Almost like I planned this out to cover all of the concepts that we had just learned over the past week. All right, let's dive in here. So first things first, we need a way to add a to-do list item, right? So I'm going to take out my hello, and I'm going to add an input type text, and we'll make the placeholder what you doing. Chaz, you wouldn't have an app.js if your create React app didn't work. So I would recommend rfing out of whatever folder you created and then trying to redo your create React app. Create React app is what creates our index.js or app.js, all of that stuff. If you're having problems, I can put you in a breakout room with Ariel. Okay, so I come over here, I get what you're doing, but I don't have, I can type things in here. There needs to be some submit button, right? So I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to add a new button, and it's going to say add. Okay, this is regular HTML. Now I need my add button to do something. And this is literally what I do at work day in and day out, right? I go step by step, and I'm working on, all right, need a way for them to type something in. Now I need a way for them to actually add that to the list. Okay, now that I've got this button, I need it to do something, right? So I'm going to say, hey, when you click on this button, I want you to add item to list. Well, if I save that and come over to my React, React's like, what's add item to list? I don't know how to do that. So we come over here and we say, hey, const add item to list is going to be some function. Whoop. And it's going to console log clicked. So I come over here, I click, and I look at my console, and I get clicked coming out. Well, why do I do that? Because this has to do a whole bunch of things. If I steamroll through all of this code, I'm going to have to say, whoa, hold up. Where's this breaking? So I'm able to break it down, and I'm constantly testing. I'm saying, hey, does my input show up on the page? Yes, it does. Does my button show up on the page? Yes. Does it say the word add in it? Yes, it does. Okay, now what's next? I need it to do something when it's clicked on. So I add my on click, I take my add item to list, and I create a new function for it right up here. Now, what do I want it to do? Right now, just console log out clicked. Okay, but when I think about it, I need more than the console log clicked. I want to know what was typed in here. So what I need to do is I'm going to take out this import logo because we're not using that logo, and I'm going to import use state from React. Because we need to get the value of this input. Okay, now that we've got that, we can say, hey, we told it to use state, we told it to import it, now let's use it. Let's say const task, let's call it new task. New task and set new task are coming from use state. Now we're using use state now, that import's working, but we've got to use these two functions. We're going to say, hey, the value of the input is coming from our new task. And these curly braces are telling it, hold up, I'm not sending you HTML anymore. We're doing something in our JavaScript. Christy, I'm going to come to you in 1 second. Now we say we come over here and type whatever we want, and it's not working because we haven't told it, hey, when this changes, use set new task to update our state value new task so that the browser sees the whole value. So we come in here and we say on change is going to say task typed in. But now we've got to define const task typed in. It's going to be a function that takes the event. Where's the event coming from? It's coming from our on change. Okay, now we are going to set the new task. We're linking our state up here to our event target value. Okay, now I come over here, I can type again, but if I click here, I just get clicked. Well, what I want to get is the value of this input. So I'm going to, instead of console logging clicked, I'm going to console log out my new task from up here. Come over here and I click add, and now I see ABC coming out down here. Told you I was turning up the speed. I'm going to stop there, make sure everyone's following along. Make sure that in your browser, you can type ABC, click the add button, and get ABC showing up in your console. We'll share this in the live stream. And I will start a poll and see how we're doing. Oh, Christy, go ahead with your question. Sorry.
I just wanted to do the slow down. That was all. I didn't have a question.
I wanted to get to a breaking point where things were functional. So give everyone a moment to hopefully catch up a little bit. Once we are caught up, I will do one more explanation just to make sure all of this is sinking in. This is all circular. So as long as you can follow through, where's use state coming from? What's new task holding? What does set new task do? How does task typed in end up running? How do we take the value in state and use it in this input? All of that. It's a lot going on. This is 28 lines of code. Certainly feels like it's doing a lot more than 28 lines of code. Doug, go ahead.
Sorry, I had the poll in front of me on mute. Why do we need to set value equals to new task? Wouldn't the set new task still get the value of the input field in task typed in?
Task typed in is getting the value and it needs to save it into the state.
Right, but then why in the input field, why do we have to have value equal to new task?
Because otherwise it doesn't know to use the value in the state.
But
So-
wouldn't the value be whatever we type in? So if you said event.target.val set new task event.target.value, wouldn't it just set that to whatever was in the input field?
So there are two types of inputs, right, in React. What we can do if we do the value, if we don't put a value and an on change on, and we come in here and we refresh and we type in ABC, it works fine. This is what is called an uncontrolled component because React does not have a grasp on the value and the change listener. So what happens if we put this on change back in and refresh and type in ABC? It's not gonna, I thought it was gonna throw an error on me. Basically, what's happening is we're storing the value into the state, which is good because we wanna, but the state isn't actually updating it in the input. So whenever we do an on change with, whenever we do an on change, we wanna use a value, and whenever we do the value, we wanna use an on change, because if we do both of them, React is now not only controlling what happens when the state fires, it's also being able to control the re-render as every letter gets typed in because the value is tied to the state. So if we don't tie value to the state, React doesn't get to control what is actually showing up in that input.
Okay, when it gets refreshed.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
If you did not get that answer, that is completely fine. That is a really in-depth. If we add value here and don't have the on change, it will yell at us and say you provided a value prop to a form field without an on change. This will render a read-only field. If the field should be mutable, in other words, if we should be able to change the input in that, use default value, otherwise set on change or use read-only. So that's if we set the value but don't set the on change, but 99% of the time, if you're using value, you should also be using your on change.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
So I accidentally exited out of my localhost. Do I just go in and type localhost again in a new tab?
Oh, yes. If you exit it out in Chrome, but it's still running in your terminal in VS Code, you can just go to localhost :3000 and it will pop right back up.
All right, thank you.
Or you could Control-C in your terminal that's running the server and then hit up and enter, and that would restart the server and open up localhost 3000 for you. That would be the equivalent of like turning off live server and turning it back on. Doug, did you still have a question, or did I just not lower your hand?
My code stopped working. You mind working through it with me?
Sure. Go ahead and share your screen.
Probably be something simple. 21, 27.
Okay, task type in is not defined. Let's go look at 21. Okay, so we've got, scroll up a little bit. The problem is you put your task type in inside of add item to list. So this whole thing needs to be moved to right here so it's outside, because task type in doesn't have to do anything with item to list.
Okay.
I go next. Somebody else's hand raised.
Oh, if I can stop drawing over all over Wayne's screen. And just careful that you take that line 12 curly brace and move that to 16. Well, between 15 and 16. Yeah, you got it. Okay, save, and that should fix most of your problems. Okay, click and watch out and hit the add button. You should see the input of your text field in there. Christy, go ahead.
Okay, that's my code. And then this is,
Okay, so line 8 is the problem. And we're seeing it says line 8, parsing error missing semicolon. So when we get an error, we really have to read the error, right? I know it's intimidating because it's all those lines of text, but React is really trying to tell you exactly where your problem is.
Yeah, I this is new. This is okay. So mine is not in the middle of the page.
That's fine. It's not supposed to be.
Oh, okay. And then what are we typing in? Just you said 1, 2, 3.
Type in anything and click the add button. And if you can see whatever you typed in your console, you're caught up.
Okay. Thank you.
Can you tell me that second way? Because I think I lost it like out of the terminal, so I can't see my localhost anymore. It's
Yep.
like we're loading.
So you're going to, in your VS Code, go back to your files, right click on package.json, open an integrated terminal. Down here, you are going to npm run start and hit enter. And that should pop open your localhost 3000. If it doesn't, let me know. We can share your screen and get you back up and running.
Nope, it works. Thank you.
Cool. All right, we hit the 10 threshold. Any questions? Any waits? I'm almost there.
Hey, Max,
No, not for you.
you shush. After you're done, I need you to go over how to delete the files after all, because a couple of us, me included last night, when you don't see D towards the end, that is where the confusion is coming in. 34, day 3, day 4 playgrounds are all mixed together. So we need to go over that to an extent at some point, please, because I told Danielle to wait for you. There's a couple of students that have that.
Okay, so where we're at here is we want to be careful. When we're in the day 4 folder, right? We need to make sure we're in the day 4 folder or whatever day we're in before we create any React app. So what we want to do in the terminal to confirm that is just pwd. So I'm going to go into my desktop and I'm working my way down to my code folder and I'm in week 12 and I think I'm doing great. So I pwd and all of a sudden I go, hold on, I'm in week 12. I'm in the wrong spot. I want to be inside of my day folder. So I'm going to cd into that. And now that I'm here, what npx create react app is doing for me is creating a folder with whatever name I give it in that command. So if I npx create react app, it is doing that in whatever folder my working directory is. So to confirm whatever my working directory is, I'm going to print my working directory, pwd, and that's going to show me this path. Now, let's say I accidentally am in my week 12 folder and I npx create react app, my world famous whoops app. Okay, what that's doing is if I look in my Finder, because I was not in day 4, I got whoops here by accident. So if this is a blank app, if I haven't worked on this yet, if you know it's just a misfire, I can just right click on this folder and move it right to the trash. However, if I'm in a situation where I have my whoops and my whoops is in day 4 playground, I was accidentally in my playground, I created React app, and now I've got whoops in playground. I don't want that there. Whoops is its own completely separate app. All I need to do is take whoops and drag it out of my playground folder into my day 4 folder. So the easiest place to do this is the column view right up here, because every time you open a new folder, it's going to show you whatever is in that folder. So all you need to do if you've got a whole create React app folder going on inside of a wrong one, if you're in column view, is just drag and drop it out. Unless that app is empty. If you haven't worked on it, then you can just right click on that folder and move it to the trash.
Thank you.
Okay. We've got 10 votes in. We feeling okay? Okay. Moving on. All right, we've got, if I type something in and hit test, I get my input down here. Okay, so what's the next logical step here? It's a to-do list app, right? I want to click the add button and I want my item to show up down here. But I need to keep track of all of my items that I would like to show up. And if I am keeping track of a list of items, what kind of data type do I want to use? An array, you got it, Zach. But now we're going to get tricky. Whenever that array updates, I want it to show up in my HTML. It's almost like I want to use state to store an array. Okay, let's do it. We're going to say const tasks, and set tasks is going to be a use state that is starting out as an empty array. Okay, use state, we're reusing that same import. That's completely fine. Tasks is going to be our array. And whenever we want to update our tasks, we're going to use set tasks. Okay, now we need to put our new task into our array. So what we're going to do is we are going to set tasks to, and this is where it's going to get a little funky. We can't use .push. Here's why. Tasks is what we call an immutable variable or a constant variable. We can't modify tasks itself. When we call .push, we're pushing onto the existing tasks. React is not going to like that. React wants us to update the array using the set tasks method. So the whole push method doesn't quite work. So instead, what we do is we say create a new array and take all the existing items of the tasks and put it into the array. This 3 dots is what we call a spread operator, and I'm hoping VS Code touched on that. Free Code Camp touched on that somewhere. But what we're basically doing is saying copy this ... tasks is saying copy whatever is currently in the tasks array into this new array that we're setting up, then add the new task that we're pulling from the state, which is linked to our value that we just typed in. Okay. That is how we're adding the new task into the list, but now we've got to show that list somewhere. So we're going to come down, and after our button, we're going to say, hey, there's an unordered list coming here. There's going to be a bunch of bullet points. And we're going to go over our list of tasks and map over them to get out each individual task. This is going to be the string that we added to the array up here. Then, I promise I'm going to go over all of this again. We're one step away from it working. We're going to return a list item with the task inside of it. So come over here, I type in ABC and I hit add, and ABC shows up. And then I type in DEF and hit add, and DEF shows up. Okay, it's working, it's doing what we wanted. We only added 4 lines of code, and already we've got brain fires going on, right? There's a lot of stuff we just did. We started out by saying, hey, we need to keep track of a new thing in state, because this is keeping track of what got typed into the input. But what we need to keep track of is all of the things that got added after they get added to the list. So, but we knew it was a list. We knew we were trying to store multiple variables here. So we use state, but instead of starting out as an empty array, what we were able to do is, instead of it starting out as an empty string, which is what we did in this new task, we started it out as an empty array, essentially an empty task list. We then get access to tasks. When this code first loads, tasks is going to be the empty array. Set tasks is the function that we use in order to update our tasks itself. Okay, but now we've got a problem. We've got our add item to list here. Our add item to list is firing whenever the add button is clicked. But we know items in state are what we call immutable. They're constants. We can't update them directly. The only way that we can update the tasks is by using the set tasks function. The problem is the way we know to add something to the end of the array is to use a push method. We can't push because that would modify our initial tasks. So what we do is we say set tasks, and set tasks is like, okay, what do you want me to do? And in answer to your question, Larry, yes, React is returning from use state the tasks and set tasks function that's built in under the hood of use state. So we're in set tasks here. We know we have to use set tasks because we can't modify tasks directly. So instead, what we do is we say, hey, set the tasks to a copy of what is already in the tasks. Go get the tasks and spread them out into this new array that we just added. That's what the ... tasks is doing. Then, once we've got all the existing items in the tasks list that is stored in our state, go ahead and add whatever the new task is that we have typed in. Well, how does it know what the new task is that we typed in? That is coming from the use state that is tied to our task typed in and the value of the input. Okay, so now that we did set tasks, it knows, hey, because we're calling a set function from our state, I need to go down here and figure out what else is new in our HTML. Okay, our inputs stay the same, nothing going on there. The button's still the same. Oh, we've got an unordered list here. What's in the unordered list? It's the tasks. The tasks are coming from up here. Well, we just set the tasks to include our new task here. So we're going to come down here and we're going to map over our array. We're getting each individual item, each individual task out of the array. Okay, now what do we want to do with each individual task? I would like an LI to come out for each task, and then we're going to use our curly braces again and say, hold on, the task is coming from each individual item in the tasks list, which is coming all the way from our tasks in state, which is getting set when we add a new item to the list. I mean, it's really easy. I mean, if you didn't get that, I mean, come on now. Kidding. I know this is a lot, but understanding this is understanding what 90% of React is. So if you can get over this hurdle, if you can just understand this section of code, you have mastered React, most of it. I know it sounds crazy. I know React is a different way of thinking, but what it's preventing us from doing is having to write our update HTML method. It's preventing us from having to go into the DOM and get element by ID. It's letting us just update our data in the state. And as long as the HTML knows to pull that data out of the state, it automatically is going to render everything out for us and make it show up in our HTML. It's almost like we could get data from an API and set it into the state, and our HTML would magically update and show all of that data. Foreshadowing. Okay, so made it to 8:27. Your homework for this weekend is to not only get this working, which I will share in the live stream, it is to add a done button, and that done button is going to make sure it either removes whatever task got clicked on from the list, or it's going to show it as crossed off down here. The crossed off solution is probably the easier one to implement. So you need to add a done button to each task on the list. And when it is done and you click on it, it needs to reflect that in the user interface. And you have to do the weekly feedback, which Ariel just dropped in. That weekly feedback is going to give us a good pulse check, because we're going to be able to figure out, all right, where do we need more practice with React next week, right? We've got another week of React. And the last thing you need to do is vote on the poll that I'm dropping in on whether or not you would like a summer recess or not, which would not be next week. It would be the following week. With that said, if you do vote to take a break, not next week, but the following week, the program will only be 23 weeks long. Unfortunately, we can't add a week on to the end of the program based off of graduation and getting the cohort after you guys started. Ariel also posted a poll on whether or not you would like to do a capstone check-in with her. And I can also likely attend that meeting if you want me to. If not, if you want to do it with Ariel, who is someone who has not only done a capstone, but has started their capstone over and over again to make it perfect, you can check in with her. That will be at 4 p.m. Office hours will be Sunday at 5 p.m. And please vote in the poll for summer recess, and we can gauge it from there. Going right up to the last minute here. I will stick around for the next 10 minutes. I'm going to stop the recording. And Christy, you can ask